Good afternoon, I'm Keith Silva. There's no new news today. Instead, we bring you an extended visit across the fence. In the spirit of the holiday and our longer than usual runtime, I'm reminded of a quote from the author William Faulkner. No barbecue is worth anything unless it takes all day. If you've got the grill going for the 4th, allow us to bring you a side of history. We may have 25 or so minutes, and that may not be enough to contain the person and the personality we're talking about today, and I don't just mean our guest. Today we're going to discuss events that took place 200 years ago. Epic events so monumental, so unbelievable, so je ne sais quoi, that our story begins with a tour that started in 1824 and continued for the next 15 months, winding through New York City, New Orleans, and New England, and on and on and on and on. This was the hottest ticket in every town, village, or wide spot in the road in the fairly new United States of America. I'm only going to say this name once, so here goes. Marie, Joseph, Paul, Yves, Roche, Gilbert du Monthier de Lafayette, Marquis de Lafayette, or better yet, just Lafayette. To talk with us about Revolution, heroes, and prominent 18th century celebrities, we've asked Vermont historian and antiquarian, which is just a $10 word for someone who collects books, Kevin Graffinino, to join me. Kevin's latest book is Vermontiana. It's about collecting books, maps, and ephemera having to do with Vermont, and he is also the author of Ira Allen, a biography. Kevin, welcome back to Across the Fence.
Thanks, Keith. Nice to be here.
I think that I'm not overstating it to say that Lafayette was outsized from the minute he was born. In my very basic research, I learned that he had an ancestor who fought alongside Joan of Arc.
Yes.
He had ancestors who were in the Crusades, and one who even brought back the crown of thorns to France. That, you know, no one was there to sort of record that. So who was Marquis de Lafayette?
He's a French aristocrat. He is born and raised in south central France. He is part of the nobility. He lives a life of privilege. He's very well educated as a soldier from his early teens. He's sophisticated, he's smart. He falls in love with the American cause. When America declares independence, Lafayette's a teenager, and he adopts the American small d democracy. He's strongly anti-slavery. He's a very interesting guy, but he becomes enthusiastic beyond belief about America and its cause.
Right, and you said teenager. He was 19 when he leaves France in a ship that he had commissioned himself.
I think he bought it, actually.
He bought it, okay. So this is someone with deep pockets and a deep love of America. And so he leaves his homeland, travels to America. Where does he go?
He goes to find George Washington. And they bond because Lafayette is the right age to be sort of a son to Washington. They're both Freemasons, which gives them an important bond as well. And Lafayette is charming. He's exotic for the American military. And Washington makes him a member of Washington's staff. He keeps him close at hand. Lafayette wants to be a military commander. He wants a division. He's 19 years old. Washington says, "Patience, young fellow." And he teaches him, they learn, and that's the reason Lafayette is a symbol of European support for the American Revolution.
And that will pay off a few years down the line. Yeah. If culture-shaking musicals are to be believed, Lafayette was the coolest kid at the cool kids table. Washington, as you've already mentioned, Jefferson, Adams, Hamilton, Madison, Monroe, they all want a piece of this guy. Yeah. Is it just that European je ne sais quoi?
Well, he's younger than many of the French officers who come over.
Okay.
And he bonds with people like Hamilton, Aaron Burr. They're the young Turks in the American military. They're just starting their military careers, and whatever else Lafayette was, he was charming. He knew how to make friends with people. And because we want so desperately to get France into the war on our side, he becomes an important spokesperson between America and France.
My French isn't very good, so whatever right place at the right time is in French, that is definitely where Lafayette lands.
He lands with, he is not as important a military commander as some of the other Europeans who come over here, but his ties to the court in Paris, his ability to speak for America in France remains and becomes and remains tremendously important.
So let's talk about, so Washington says, he wants to command a regiment.
Immediately.
Immediately, Washington says, easy there, big fella. What is his involvement with the military in the American Revolution?
Well, he goes back to France. He's here for about a year. He goes back to France, spokesperson to the court, important in helping the court become to, yes, we will support you militarily. Comes back. His real significance is he's important in trapping Cornwallis at Yorktown. He commands, by then he's old enough to be in command of something, and he plays a moderately important role in bottling Cornwallis up. Cornwallis surrenders, and in effect, the war is over. So we could have done it without Lafayette. We might not have easily gotten France into the war without people like him.
So one battle that shows up in Lafayette's biography and in the Wikipedia entry of Lafayette is the Battle of Brandywine. What is the Battle of Brandywine?
He's badly wounded at Brandywine, which increases his heroic stature. He bleeds for America, and it is a pretty severe wound. Brandywine's one of the many conflicts in the early years of the war, but he gets military experience. He gets, in effect, the Purple Heart, and he has stature. He's not just a young teenage fop anymore. He's a soldier, and this helps him. And his heroic stature grows because of this.
I heard a little bit of resignation in your voice talking about Yorktown and the surrender of Cornwallis. Are you saying that it just so happens that that Lafayette was there, or is he a strategist? Is he some military genius?
He wants to be a strategist. He keeps coming up with plans for raids and campaigns, and the Congress and Washington keeps saying, well, that's a good idea, but we're not going to do it. And as a soldier, he's not as impressive as some of the other generals in the American Revolution. He's talented, and he's just very young.
And when he gets to Yorktown, he comes with a whole bunch of ships, not just the ones he's built or paid for himself, and that's the French Navy, which essentially bottles Cornwallis up.
Exactly. He can't get out, and the British can't get anyone to him with the French fleet there. Lafayette is on the ground, on the army side, and he does an effective job. He's become a good soldier by then. The fleet is much more important than Lafayette.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So fast forward in 1824, as I previously said, the last of the Founding Fathers, James Monroe, invites Lafayette back to the United States. It's been about 50 years.
He had been here in 1784, briefly. He comes back a couple of years after the war, does a little bitty tour of 3 or 4 states, goes back to France, is heavily involved in the French Revolution, in French politics. He manages, as an aristocrat, to keep his head when they're guillotining a lot of the aristocracy. But in 1824, we're just about to hit the 50th. Of the revolution, and the revolutionary generation is dying off. And he comes back, and it's like the greatest rock star you can imagine touring the United States. The country goes wild over him. Yeah,
we're going to talk a lot about the rock starness of that 1824, 1825 tour. Briefly, he's back in France, and this is the part that I think is hard for Americans to understand. So, the American Revolution happens, Battle of Yorktown, the British surrender, the greatest upset, world turns upside down, whatever you want to say, in military and world politics, Lafayette goes back and says, we're going to try this American thing. So an aristocrat, someone who is a marquis, decides, hey, democracy and giving the power to the people is a better idea. The French Revolution, he is central to that. Is he... Okay, you're giving me the hand.
He's involved.
He's involved.
I don't think he's one of the radical leaders.
Sure.
He believes in constitutional monarchy.
Right.
He just wants the king, whoever the king is, not to want absolute power.
Gotcha.
And he's not terribly successful at persuading the French king to become more liberal. And the surprising thing is that the radicals in the French Revolution don't turn on Lafayette. They criticize him sharply, but he keeps his head.
Right.
He's exiled, he's put in prison in Austria for several years, but he survives. As I said earlier, very strong believer in anti-slavery movement, the rights of man, small d democracy, but not to the extent of lining people up for execution.
Right,
and
right.
It's a tricky time in France.
And it does help if you're away in Austria.
Well, he's in prison.
Right, he's in prison.
He goes to Austria, he flees to Austria and is captured and I think spends close to 5 years in an Austrian prison.
Helps you keep your head that way if everyone else is losing theirs at home.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the States. It's the 50th anniversary. Monroe, who's one of the last founding fathers to still be alive, invites Lafayette back to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of the country. What is this like? Is it designed from the start to be this grand tour, or how does that develop?
I don't think so. Lafayette comes over, I think he lands in August of 1824. He spends the winter in Washington. And then in the spring, I think he launches this, I'm going to visit all 24 states. And it's the first time anything like this has happened in America. We're still a nation that looks to Europe for culture, for approval, for sophistication, and we look to France and England and other European nations. And Lafayette comes, he's I think the only survivor in the European support for the war who comes back for this anniversary. And it's extraordinary. It's a pre-electronic age. There's no television, there's no Twitter, but the newspapers pick up on this, and his progress through the states, every single time he stops, there's a parade, there's a speech, there are veterans who come out and shake his hand. I mean, I tried thinking about the show, what's the parallel in our lifetime? And it's maybe the astronauts in the early 60s, the ticker tape parades for maybe Lindbergh when he crosses the Atlantic. It's an extraordinary national phenomenon.
One of the things that's interesting about this national phenomenon is, how old is he? 70? In his 70s?
Pushing 70.
Okay, so late 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
Remember, this is, early 19th century 70s. That's, could be 110 now.
He's quite elderly.
He's quite elderly. Yeah. No highways back then, as you said, not the electronic age. So he's on horseback, he's walking, he's in carriages.
He's in carriages.
I'm sure he's in carriages.
We give him carriages.
But still, he's touring every U.S. state, goes up and down the East Coast, goes down as far as New Orleans. He sees in any state. And in June of 1825, after he spent nearly a year in the U.S., he crosses the bridge in Cornish, New Hampshire, and rolls into Vermont.
Goes into Windsor.
He goes into Windsor. There's a whole movable feast that kind of follows Lafayette as he goes. And I visited the Vermont History Center in Barre to learn what sort of artifacts they have for Lafayette's visit.
We're here at the Vermont History Center in Barre, Vermont. My name is Amanda Gustin. I'm the Director of Collections and Access with the Vermont Historical Society, and I'm going to take you today through some of the objects we have in our collection that are related to the Marquis de Lafayette, and especially to his visit to Vermont in 1825. So first up along here, we have a pamphlet. This woman named Mary Grace Canfield did quite a lot of early research, piecing together sources to see where exactly did Lafayette go, what did he experience on his trip. So we thought we'd start our exhibit here off with her pamphlet, and specifically with the map inside that pamphlet. He covered a lot of ground in a short visit, so it's helpful to have a visualization of where he went in the state. And then a lot of the objects that we have related to Lafayette are of what we might call a relic kind. They were touched by him, or they were in the same room as him. Someone wore them to a party that he also attended. These objects maybe don't have historical value in and of themselves, but what they speak to is the deep emotion that people had about this visit, how important they felt their time with him was, and how much they treasured the things that were also present with him that day. So we have knee buckles that were worn by a gentleman who attended a reception with Lafayette on his visit to Royalton. We have some very pieces of a tankard that Lafayette drank from at a stop that he took in Woodstock. They are true pieces. There's not much left of them today, but someone cared enough to preserve them over the 200 years now. We also have a handwritten manuscript here in which someone took down the speech that Lafayette gave in Montpelier when he was received. You can see there's some crossouts and some changes and additions. They did work to try and get a faithful representation of what he said that day, although we don't know who wrote this. We can date based on the paper and the handwriting and the text that it is from that day. And then we also have things that are further removed, but still do speak to the deep emotional tie and respect that people held for the Marquis de Lafayette. We have what looks just like an ordinary strip of wood here, and this was collected by a man named Charles Branch, who served in the Civil War and then spent a lot of time over the rest of his life collecting relics from just a huge variety of sources. This small strip of wood was one that he personally collected from the building that had been Washington and Lafayette's headquarters in Richmond in 1781. This is per his telling. He took this piece of wood because he felt that connection to both Washington and Lafayette and wanted to have that with him and as part of his collection. We also have an engraving here. We don't know who created it, but this was created by or commissioned by Mary Grace Canfield for that pamphlet that we started this case with of the Marquis de Lafayette so that she could have a visual representation of him. So we've put that out as sort of an artifact of the telling of the history of Lafayette. And we have another 2 souvenir glass plates that were probably created roughly around the time of Lafayette's visit or shortly afterwards. They're very small, but they have a very small ship in the center that was meant to be a depiction of the ship that brought Lafayette to the United States, a ship named the Cadmus. So people could purchase these, even if they weren't present for Lafayette's visit, they could purchase them to remember the visit.
My thanks to Amanda Gustin and the Vermont Historical Society. Kevin, you grew up in Montpelier.
I did.
You've seen some of these artifacts that were there.
Well, Montpelier is one of his principal stopping places. State government, the State House. He's there overnight, actually. It's the only town he sleeps in, in Vermont. So I remember some of these artifacts from my childhood in the 60s. There are plaques and other memorabilia around Montpelier. Lafayette was here.
Right. What's interesting is that, so he comes back in 1824. That's a long, several more years until the Civil War and the end of slavery in America. Lafayette, very anti-slavery. Any idea, any indication how that went as he was touring the slave states of the U.S.?
I'm guessing he was sophisticated enough not to push the issue in the slave states, but throughout his life, he speaks and writes and urges that slavery be abolished in French possessions, of course, but he also tells Washington and others in America, you really need to get rid of this awful institution. So that's one of the reasons he's admirable in the 21st century.
Interesting. He makes his way to the Champlain Valley. He gets gets to put his masonry skills to work. So it's kind of a working vacation, Kevin.
He does a lot of laying of cornerstones all over America. Anytime there's a building, you want Lafayette there.
Right. And one of those is at the old mill. He lays that cornerstone. I like what you said. There are many cornerstones throughout the East Coast. Lafayette
he lays the cornerstone of the Bunker Hill Monument.
Okay.
Which is what the prelude for his coming back up through New Hampshire and Vermont.
Oh, okay. And also takes soil from Bunker Hill to be buried with in France.
Yes, his son arranges that. Yeah.
When the time comes.
Right.
When the time comes. What does he do in? You said he only stays overnight in Montpelier, so he gets to Burlington and takes the ferry across the lake back to New York.
Yeah, he's here for the day. He has a parade through the center part of town. He's met by a military escort in every town he goes to. And then he goes up the hill to UVM and lays the cornerstone of the southern third of the old mill.
Very
in
good.
1825. The previous old mill had burned down. Then there is a giant, brilliant reception in the evening for him at Grassmount, which is the home of Governor Van Ness. He then, after the reception, goes down to the lake and gets on the steamboat Phoenix, which would have been an adventure in 1825, goes to Whitehall and heads south down to New York City.
How much longer is he in the States?
Not long. He leaves in the summer.
Okay.
I think in August. He's here in June. He leaves in August, sails back to France.
Sails back to France, and
he remains active in politics. He is a leader of the movement to remove the king in 1830, replace him with another king. That doesn't go any better, really, for Lafayette's hope of a more democratic country. He dies in 1834. There is a memorial reception, I think, in Woodstock that draws 3,000 people. So he's still a hero. And in 1883, they put a statue of him up on the UVM green.
Right.
Looks across at, it's the north end of the green, looking across at the old medical college. And I looked this up.
Okay.
There are 17 counties in the United States named after him. There are 69 cities or towns named after him, and innumerable streets, squares, schools, other things. He's still a heroic figure in America.
And still, he's literally a place in America.
Absolutely.
He has a place. Yep. Many places, according to your research. Yep. I didn't do as exhaustive research, but there was one note in the Wikipedia article that I have to bring up, and I asked you about this. So he's about to leave for France, like he's getting on the boat the next day, and an old colleague or military man comes up to him and talks about a gentleman who's in a debtor's prison in Danville, of all places. Who knew Danville had a debtor's prison back in the 19th century, but they did. And Lafayette pays this man's debt so that he can go free. Does that sort of thing, you think, happen during this whole tour, him doing favors? And
he meets hundreds of ex-comrades on the tour. One of them, who he doesn't get to meet, is General William Barton, founder of Barton, Vermont, and one of the first settlers in Barton, Vermont. General Barton is, by all accounts, a cantankerous, stubborn old guy. He loses a court case for selling a piece of land twice to different people. He is assessed costs totaling about $100. He refuses to pay, even though he has the money. I'm not going to do it. So they don't actually put him in prison in Danville.
Right.
They're not going to imprison a 65-year-old Revolutionary War hero. They basically, I think, say, all right, the limits of the town are the prison.
Right.
Go home. And you can't leave town. So he couldn't go to Montpelier to meet with Lafayette. He sends a comrade who knew them both, and the comrade tells a piteous tale of, General wanted to be here, General. And as he's leaving, as he's boarding the ship, Lafayette sends the money north, and General Barton goes home to Rhode Island and dies there a few years later. So he's not chained up in Danville.
I do find it curious that couldn't make it to your reception, General.
Yeah.
I'm in Danville. I can't make it to Montpelier. How do you think of Lafayette? We've talked a lot about him, but you personally, what is he to you?
I admire him. Any teenager who would put his life on the line in support of another country. And he doesn't have to do this. He's rich beyond belief compared to most Americans in the 1770s. He does it out of a sincere support of the American cause. And you gotta like that as an American. This guy comes over, he gets badly wounded in one battle, he serves a military value, he's a diplomatic value is considerable, and throughout his life he argues for less aristocracy, more democracy, and trying to work things out without killing everybody on the other side. I like him.
Yeah, what's not to like, right? I mean, 19, buy your own ship, fighting a war. I don't know as that would work today.
No, nor do I. He's more popular in America and has been for a century and a half than he is in France. Opinion varies on his effectiveness as a small d Democrat. But in America, it's tough to find people who are critical of him. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and hard to be critical of someone who does what he does, his support of anti-slavery causes. Lafayette, a man for all seasons, a man for all centuries.
Yes, I think so, in America. Yes.
In America. Kevin, it's always fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on Across the Fence. That takes care of our 4th of July spectacular. We hope you've enjoyed it. I'm Keith Silva. This is Across the Fence. Thanks for being part of our family.